Good day and welcome to the Leading with Nice interview series podcast. My name is Matthew Ewell and we want to help you inspire others, build loyalty, and get results. Now, we're doing something a bit different again today. This is actually part 2 of a 2-part series. We're here in Canada's capital, Ottawa, to speak with Brandon Peacock, the founder of Hit the Ground Running Canada, a nonprofit, soon to be a charity, that helps victims of trauma. If you haven't already, go back and listen to our first episode, part 1 of this series, and then come back and listen to this one. But you're going to take away some great learning for your business, for your nonprofit, for your charity, for your association that you can take from Brandon's story. So, without further ado, let's get to the second part. Good day and welcome to the Leading with Nice interview series podcast. My name is Matthew Ewell, and we want to help you inspire others, build loyalty, and get results. Now, we are actually doing part 2 of our 2-part interview with Brandon Peacock. And if you haven't listened to part 1, I can't believe I'm going to encourage you to do this. Stop listening right now. Go back and listen to part 1 to hear Brandon's story. But to catch you up, I found Brandon on TikTok, of all places, and Brandon had this story which I had to watch 3 or 4 times, so I was like, what is this? Did I just hear this correctly? Long story short, he was going to get his haircut one night, and the next thing he knew, he had been shot 3 times. He was wrong place, wrong time. He was not the target of that drive-by shooting, but he was certainly the victim of it. However, the victim label doesn't sit well with Brandon, and the reason we're talking to him today is because in addition to encapsulating a mindset of being a survivor, he's also using that idea and that mind shift to funnel his energy into a nonprofit that is he's seeking to make a charity called Hit the Ground Running. Now, last episode we talked about the incident and just shortly after he had been recovered in hospital. Today we're going to talk about his recovery and what the future looks like for him from there. So Brandon, thanks for coming back for part 2, man. It would have been a very bad podcast if you didn't stick around. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me, like I said before, and it's always nice to get out here back to the scene of everything, you know. Right. It's good for the nerves, I guess.
So if you're watching on YouTube or on another social platform, if you're listening, we are actually in Ottawa, Canada, Canada's capital city, and this is Brandon's home. Yep. We're outside of Fresh Men's Salon, where you still haven't gotten your hair cut.
Still haven't got a cut.
A year later, and
I'll go back here though.
Okay, no, for sure.
It's good for the virtual run we have in the fall. It's the runner's aesthetic to get that little bun going up top. It looks good.
Those days are past for me, so I clearly can't do running anymore. Man buns, at least. That was probably like the 90s. I kind of my window closed. But so Brandon, when we last chatted, yep, you had just spoken about how you had this thought in your head about what legacy am I going to leave? What does it matter that I've been on this earth? Yep. And out of that, through a thought process, you said, I need to help other victims of trauma, and the way I want to do that is by establishing a nonprofit, eventually a charity, yep, that will raise money to help for physio, mental, all the recovery,
strength,
the strengthening you'll need after you are a victim of trauma. Yep. So, and you mentioned as well, the important thing is you recognize the gap was the availability of dollars to help your recovery were so sparse that you maybe, if you followed that plan, would only be at your desk, able to work. The idea of running, playing sports would probably be done for you. And you're 25 today, correct? That's where we're at?
Yeah, I think it's probably more than I never would have reached the new normal that I've reached right now. Right. I also, like I said, I was very fortunate where working with my friend Frank, who happened to be my physio. We can get into that.
So let's talk about Frank. So I think as people are listening to this, if you're a business owner, I'm going to spoil the surprise already. The key message to this particular part of the story is you found a great team. Yep. And not just talented, committed, but somebody who is passionate about you achieving your goals. Yep. They weren't trying to accomplish anything for themselves, right? They weren't trying to, Frank, your physiotherapist, was not trying to use you as leverage to get a better job to open his own thing. Yep. He was literally co-creating your future.
Yeah.
So tell us about this. So who's Frank? What does he do? And how does he figure into this story?
Yeah, so Frank Duquette, one of my good buddies. You'll hear from him, I guess, in this podcast a little bit. So he could tell you some of the inside scoop as well. We're really close friends before anything happened. Unbelievably fortunate that he happened to be a physiotherapist. Definitely played into my favor. But after everything happened, I spoke to him, obviously, not the night of. No one knew the night of, but like the day after. He was one of the first people to reach out, obviously. And I don't remember what he said, but it was something along the lines of like, I've got like a summer science project, now, right? Like
you were the summer science project?
I was the summer science project.
Yeah.
And at that moment, this guy was going to do everything it took to get me back to normal. And I was really fortunate to have him because he wasn't going to allow me the opportunity to back out of any of it either, right?
Now, what does that mean practically? Like he's gonna be calling you every day, holding you accountable. What did it mean?
So yes and no. I had my dad took some time off work the 2 months after everything that happened. So he drove me to Frank's house every day. So even if I wanted to skip, I would have had Frank on my ass. I would have had my dad. Sorry, my language there, but I would have had my dad. I would have had Frank, and I would have had myself to deal with too, right? Because I would have felt like I was letting myself down. Where I say he held me accountable is he pushed me way past any other physiotherapist that I had previously had would push me, because he understood where I wanted to be in my recovery, right? He knew that I not only wanted to get back to a regular life, I wanted to get back to the best version of myself that I could be after everything that went, that happened.
So let's give it some timeline here. We're talking about so when Frank and you kind of you said, okay, when Frank said, okay, I'm in to help you.
Yep.
And you actually, it was more than just like a promise. It was actually, okay, now come over to my house and let's do this.
God, yeah.
How much time between being shot and that starting to happen?
So it was about, I want to say 2.5 weeks. And the only reason it was that long was because my plastic surgeons wouldn't let me stand up on my one leg because the wounds were so fragile, the stitching, because you can't really see it now, but the gap in my calf was massive. Yeah. Like we thought we were gonna need a skin graft. We got lucky that we managed to stitch it back together. And they were like, look, you can't push it. You're gonna reopen it. You're gonna have to come back. It's gonna be a massive setback. So anyways, we took about 2.5, 3 weeks. And I got over to Frank's as soon as I could. And at that point, I couldn't walk.
Well, yeah, so I want to give you, so you told me a story about the 3-step story.
Yeah.
I want people to appreciate that moving into physiotherapy with Frank was necessary, and not necessarily like, when you have a rotator cuff injury, you can still move around and get there. But you were actually in such a shape that you shared with me a 3-step challenge.
Yep.
And I think this will really help people appreciate like where you were at in your recovery and what your physical state was like. So tell us about this, the hospital's charge to you that you had a 3-step challenge that you need to complete. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so the 3-step challenge was super crazy to me. And again, going into the hospital, I was in relatively good shape, I'd like to think, right? I'm playing sports probably 5 days a week leading up to the injury. So to get released from the hospital, and this was like my biggest goal the entire time I was in there, was to get out of there, because it was the middle of the summer, there was no AC, it was scorching hot, I was sweating every day, I couldn't shower because I couldn't move, and I had 2 roommates who were up having night terrors all night, screaming every hour on the hour, and I could not sleep whatsoever. So my biggest goal was to get out. And in order to get out, all of my surgeons had given me permission to leave, except for my physio team and the social worker. But my physio team basically said that I needed to be able to walk up 3 stairs in the staircase with a crutch and the railing. So
easy, right?
Yeah, you think,
3
right?
steps,
you think it's easy, but I mean, when all your ribs are broken, your breathing is not great. It's very hard to get a good breath in, as well as I hadn't moved in 7 days, right? And the toll that takes on someone's body is massive. And like I said, when I say I haven't moved, like I could barely move up.
Yeah.
So getting out of bed for those first steps with a walker again was the toughest thing I've ever done. Well, probably the second toughest. We'll get into the toughest when we get into the physio with Frank.
But in addition, like just I want to paint a very vivid picture for people. your plastics team
Yep.
had to worry about, and you say this, you say this to me like people, like the gap in my calf.
Yeah.
Like, a gap in your calf, like that's not a thing people have, but you had one, and it impacted everything as well.
Exactly, yeah. So the plastics team, there was a massive, you can't really see it too well, I guess it's probably not even in the camera right now, but there was a massive incision in both sides of my calf on my right leg, because the blood flow was so severe, right, to the femoral artery the night of. They had to give it an out, or it would have just overloaded my leg and destroyed all the nerves in there, right? So anyways, the 3-step program, I remember having to get out of bed for, I believe, the second time. The first time I'd gotten out of bed and just stood up, maybe did like a baby step, and I was like, I can't, right? Because I couldn't put any weight on my right leg, but my left leg was also shot, right? So my left leg is kind of dragging around, and I'm using, my ribs are all broken, but I'm trying to use my arms in the walker just as like a force to drag myself around. But that's really tiring when you have a bunch of broken ribs, right? So I was able to, anyways, the 3-step challenge, I needed to get out of that hospital more than I needed anything in my entire life at that point. So I forced myself down the hallway, which was probably about 15 steps, not far whatsoever. But 15 steps at that time for me seemed like a million steps. And then I got into the staircase, and I was able to get up one step all right. The second step was tough because the way the steps work is it's a big flat, so I had a lot of space. And then when you're on the smaller steps, you need to be more narrow with your footing and your crutch placement, right? So it's a lot more tailored. Anyways, I got up those 3 steps like it was like climbing Kilimanjaro or Mount Everest. You know, it was amazing to me, and I was so happy. Walked back to my room, and I felt like I just run, an ultra marathon. Got back in my bed. I'm pretty sure I drank about 3 Gatorades after that. Just trying to replenish. But my physio finally gave me permission to go home, which was the best thing in the world to me at that time. It was the summation. You know what? It was. Why it was so great to me is once I got out of the hospital and was at home, things went almost entirely into my control again, right? When you're in the hospital, like obviously you don't know where things stand. When I was able to get out of there, I was able to kind of take control fully back of my life. I mean, I couldn't really walk still, but at least now I was out, right? And it was that next step in the road to recovery, which was great.
So you're out of the hospital. It's funny, I was thinking during that last part about the 3 steps, I was like, I wonder if people thought I was talking about a 3 steps, like, reconcile with past enemies or something. No, it's like literally 3 steps. But before we move on to the next step, I thought the other interesting fact was why 3 steps? What was the other?
With the social worker?
No, the 3 steps with it was a practical thing to get back into your house.
It was literally, I had to do 3 steps because that was the amount of steps it takes the average person to get into their home, right? Yeah. They asked my parents actually before they asked me, saying, where's he going to be staying? How will he need to get back into the house? And I literally needed to, we set up a garage level room for me, which was perfect in the summertime, so I didn't have to do much walking. But literally 3 steps was I could get into my house and into that room. That's how bad of shape I was in at that time.
Yeah.
I couldn't,
So enter Frank.
Yeah, so after that I had to take a week before I was able to actually start truly going to physio and grinding. Because my plastics team, as we talked about, my incisions were so big, and we thought I was going to need to do, that we were going to need to peel a piece of skin from my thigh and put it over my calf. We were able to stitch it up. So shout out to the plastics team if they ever watch this, because those guys were awesome and did a lot of great work. But we were able to stitch it up, which saved me a little bit of aesthetic on my leg. But it was so fragile. I probably had about, between stitches and staples, well past 100, I'd say, in summation, right, of both my legs. And if I moved too much, I could have reopened something, right? Which would have been devastating to our recovery process as everything was starting to heal up. So they made me take about an extra week. So I'd say it took about 2.5, 3 weeks to get to physio for the first time. But when I got there, I still couldn't walk. I was able to basically have my dad limp me to the car, get out, and then I would go to Frank's house because he was working, he was COVID, right? So he was at home on CERB waiting to take his national physio exam. which again was another lucky thing for me. It sucks for him, and I would never wish it on him, but it worked in my favor. So I was able to get to his place. He'd throw me over his shoulder, kind of hobble me into the basement, where he's got his kind of workout set up, and we would just go. And at that point, because I couldn't walk, it was almost all stretching. And my leg, I couldn't bend it either, right? It was basically just in this one position, unable to move. And we would go at it for 3 hours of him pulling and twisting my leg, to the point where we were just trying to straighten it out because it was so messed up at the time, right? The muscles hadn't been used in so long. There was also some damage to the femur. And I had a lot of trust in Frank. So initially, my prognosis, even my doctor said that I likely wouldn't be running again until like February 2021. I wouldn't really be playing hockey or skiing again until maybe like January, December. I'd be able to maybe walk some basic level hikes by end of September 2021, right? 3 months out.
So about the time that this podcast is being released,
yeah,
their best case scenario for you was a walk, a hike maybe.
By this time?
Well, September 2021, they said maybe.
No, that's last September.
Oh,
so
last
They were
September.
saying like 3 months. Yeah,
Right.
3 months was like I'd be able to kind of like do basic walking through paths and stuff. And me and Frank kind of looked at that, and Frank's like, nah, screw that. Like, no way. Like, we're going to kill that. And I'm like, are you sure, man? Like, these guys are practicing doctors. You're a recent physio grad. And he's like, look, it's all about the effort that you put in, and this is the most critical point in your recovery. You're going to need to trust me. We're going to go through some tough pain, but I know where your body can be. Again, it was fortunate that we were so close friends before. He knew the shape that I could get to. He's like, you just need to trust me and let me get you there. And I put all my trust in Frank, which was the best thing I ever did. So I started going over to see him 7 days a week, 3 hours a day, every single day. I was very lucky that I was a passion project for him, right? Because we were such close friends, but it was also a great learning opportunity. Like, he was messaging his group of all his students he graduated with and his friends saying like, this is the circumstances, this is what we've got. He's giving prognosis to them, and they're putting out all these like ideas of how we can fix me. I ended up meeting like 300 probably 25 physios.
I think 25 probably feels like 300.
Oh my God, yeah. But I was like, I was the guy on the table. I was the cool science project for them, and it was cool to see how every one of them I met enjoyed their field so much and was so curious they were willing to help. But when we talk about the most pain I've ever felt in my entire life, it's not getting shot. You have so much adrenaline there. Like, it is what it is. There was some pain for sure as the adrenaline starts to wear off. But that was nothing compared to the physio we went through in that first 2 weeks, probably first week and a half, where I'm literally laying on the ground for 3 hours as he's stretching my leg, and he's bending my leg like fully, he's taking it, fully bending it, trying to straighten it out. And because of the way my nerves work too, and because of the severe nerve damage, it was the most brutal pain I've ever experienced. And he would often, hit me with 30 more seconds, and then we'd finish those 30 seconds. He'd be like, all right, another minute and a half. And I'm like, okay, whatever. I trust this guy. There was multiple points where he looked at me. He's like, all right, this is going to hurt. Bite down to the pillow kind of thing. And I'd look at him like, are you crazy, man? Bite down to the pillow? Like, that's how much this is going to hurt? And he's like, look, do you want to be able to run and stuff soon? Like, do you want to get back to good health soon? Or do you want to feel sorry for yourself this entire time, right? So I just trusted him. I went through that pain, that difficult process with him. And I'm unbelievably happy that he afforded me that luxury, because it built a ton of mental toughness for me, but it also got me back to things like running in like September 2021, right? I was running when I should have been walking. I was walking my birthday is on the 23rd of July, so I was walking and I walked my first time, I think, on the day before that. So I was walking, in 3 weeks when it should have taken me probably about a month and a half to even get moving again. So I was unbelievably fortunate, and that was a big thing that made me want to start up Hit the Ground Running, was I understood the impact. I had another physiotherapist I was working with who was a phenomenal guy, but he'd hook me up to a stim. He didn't want to push me so hard that I would be fearful to come back. But that's not what I needed, right? I needed a guy who made me uncomfortable, pushed me through all this pain, because he knew that at the end of the day, that's where my greater recovery would come from, right? And that's what I want to do with Hit the Ground Running, is the people that we work with down the road, I want to be there for the recovery process of a lot of these people. Like, I want to be able to afford people the opportunity to work with people who will push them to their brink every single day to get them to their new 100%. And that's something I'm really passionate about.
You know what we haven't heard about yet?
Yeah.
The guys who shot you. Why not?
I just don't care. I mean, that's probably like a really bad way to phrase it. And it's funny because I'm sure, again, if you ask my parents, they probably care a lot more. That's one of the first questions that almost everybody asks me when they talk about the situation now. I have no idea. Like, I don't really know who they are. I don't really care to know. I'm sure I could. I think it's all out there in the news now. I just don't see that does no good to me. You know, I don't have any resentment to these guys. I don't care why they did what they did. They afforded me this opportunity that I otherwise wouldn't have had. And my mindset could be entirely different if I wasn't able to recover as well as I did. But in the first couple months, 100% of my focus was getting back to the best version of myself that I could.
Do you think that because you chose, and it sounds to me like it was a choice, like you're not hardwired not to care about that kind of thing or those kind of people that do bad things to you. But do you think that the choice you made was a key part in your recovery?
100%, yeah. You know, I think in my mind that it was a choice, but it wasn't a choice, right? Like there was no day where I was waking up and I was like, I want the book thrown at these guys. I want the worst things ever. Is like, I want to understand why they did what they did. You know, it's a weird thing to say, but there's got to be something to it, right? And I want to focus on what's in my control in my unique recovery process, and trying to deal with things that are outside of my control was going to do me no good, right? That is someone else's area of expertise. Someone else will be dealing with all of that side of everything. I could only control my recovery and how I respond to the situation. And I think that's a really important thing that matured me a lot in this process too, right? Was having to face that head on, because it's always really easy to resent anybody in any facet of your life who impacts you negatively, right? But I don't have any control over that. I didn't care, right? And I think it was unbelievably positive for me to go about it that way, but I think it also allowed me to look at everything. And one of the cool things I'm going to be working on now is I'm working with a couple community leaders in the city. I want to go into some of these more, you know, higher crime areas in the city, and I want to work with the next generation of kids coming up and tell them my story and talk about what I've been through and preach some of the stuff that we're talking about right now, because I want to be able to make a difference at the ground level, right? Like, I don't know why these guys did what they did. I'm not going to be able to change them. There's no good that can really come out for me going that direction. What I can do now, though, is I can work with the next kind of high-risk group of people who might be out there committing acts of violence or these kind of things, and hopefully help the problem at the source, which I think is really fortunate that I otherwise wouldn't have had the opportunity to do. So it sounds crazy. Everybody thinks I'm a you know, psychopath or whatever for thinking about it that way. But at the end of the day, there was just no benefit for me to stay up at night stressing about it.
How do you plan for wrong place, wrong time?
I know that you're looking for maybe some sort of like philosophical answer here.
I think I'm not. I'm actually.
Yeah.
I think you have an answer for how you plan for it. And the answer is you don't. You can't.
Yeah, you definitely can't. And I think it's what you can do is if you see something as a wrong place, wrong time situation, you're allowing yourself to become that victim of that narrative, right? I think I saw myself as a right place, right time situation. And you know, again, I've told that to my dad. My dad hates that narrative. My mom hates that narrative. I see myself now having this incredible opportunity I otherwise wouldn't have had because of the situation that I was dealt. And obviously, like I said, I was able to have a really good response other people might not have. And I empathize for people in that regard. But at the same time, it was something that impacted me in a really positive way at the end of the day, right?
So yeah, like the parallel here, I'm thinking about business that have a crisis happen upon them. The neighboring shop has a chemical spill that forces them to close for 2 weeks, 2 months. The power goes out in your town and your business has to shut down. The bus that your staff are on at a retreat gets into an accident and everybody's in the hospital. All these things that you can't control. I think the lesson here, well, I don't know, now that I've put those scenarios to you, and a business leader is saying to you, because you've talked about wanting to speak, right? So, what do you say to these businesses when you take your situation and you put it into a business context?
Yeah.
What's the message you want to tell them?
Yeah, it's funny. I think maybe something that probably ties into it is I have a bit of a background in change management, so I understand I understand the necessity of.
I just really appreciate how you're always pulling in I love that you are always pulling in your experiences, your schooling.
People are people of nurture, man. As much as nature versus nurture play a role, I think nurture is so critical in the development of any individual, right? So what I would say to business leaders going through those situations is everybody is going to have those hurdles, right? Those impairments, those crutches, like we talked about. We'll talk about that, I'm sure, after. But everybody's going to have those obstacles to success. The way that your business is going to be, viewed is how you respond to those negatives, right? Those obstacles. And it's really easy to say, like let's say you have a flood or a leak or whatever, you need to be out of your office for 2 weeks. That's really difficult, but do you have a work from home strategy already set up? Now you might have to think about doing that, right? Now maybe you can bring on 10 new employees you otherwise wouldn't have had down the road and shift a little bit of a work from home, a work from office setup, right? There's always going to be ways that you can respond to the situations and the unique experiences you're thrown at. You just have to be willing to accept that. Whereas I think, and I've seen this with a lot of people in my life, like for example, one of my old colleagues, I remember, we had our phone calls recorded for a little while, and he got a call that just kept dropping. His Wi-Fi didn't work, whatever, and he just did not want to call them back on his regular cell phone because he wouldn't get credit for it, right? Because they track your stats, whatever. And that just, it blew my mind, right? It was, sometimes you just got to take a little bit of sacrifice, move that step back and call them back from your cell phone, right? Something as simple as that. I think that a lot of people see barriers and get flustered and don't know how to respond properly. Whereas you can take these things, like you call back that client and say, hey, I'm so sorry, I'm calling you back from my personal number, I'm having some internet issues. You can laugh that off, right? It's a bit of almost a relationship builder if you see it properly. So I think that there's always a response to any sort of barrier or obstacle that you have. It's just whether or not you're willing to accept that, or if you're gonna let it fluster you and cause more problems.
And what I'm hearing from you as well too is if I leave this interview today and I go home and a client calls and says, oh, Matthew, the power's gone out on our street, we have to move and vacate, we had all these presentations for clients coming in, we don't know what to do. I can say to them, hey, I just talked to a guy, Brandon, and he would tell you this. Don't worry, don't concern yourself anymore. Not that don't worry as in oh, forget about it, it's not a problem. Don't concern yourself with the why, who, what, well, concern yourself now with your response and only your response. And maybe at a later time or date, like you said, you've actually mentioned there, I don't think you've articulated, but this is what I'm hearing, and so you correct me if I'm wrong. You said, I actually do want to address the problem of those guys who came by and shot me, but I want to address it by addressing upstream. The kids in those communities,
right? It's how can you solve that problem if it was to happen again down the road, right? So how are you prepared for this problem next time? Because let's say the power went out and the power is going to go out again, right? It's very likely that that happens. How are you going to respond to that the next time that it does? And you can use these as learning opportunities you otherwise wouldn't have had, or you can get flustered by them and let them throw you off.
So here's my advice for you: when you're telling this story in the future, it's not actually that you don't care about these guys. What you care about is preventing more of those guys from becoming those guys. And I think that's a beautiful story. The other question I want to talk about is, man, you not stop smiling. Not many people have talked about the time they've been shot several times and continue smiling. But surely there must have been setbacks when you were like, screw this noise, man.
And I think it's, I've had that smile since I was a kid, and it's going to take a lot more than 3 bullets to wipe that smile off my face.
Amazing.
But at the end of the day, there was some dark times. I know we talked about the first couple days in the hospital, but September 2021 was really tough for me. I lived with my parents. Obviously, I couldn't move. July and August. So September, I was kind of able to get back to driving around, get out of the house. I was living on my own at that point again. Reintegrating to the world was really difficult for me because you're very hyper anxious, right? I'd go to the gym for my recovery and I'm looking around at every person I can see thinking, is this guy a threat to me? Is this going to be the day where this guy comes to finish me off? All these crazy things, right? And that's something that is really, really hard to understand, I think, unless you go through some sort of life-altering circumstance like that. And as much as I read about the response I was going to have and wanted to learn about it and talk to people who, who have much greater knowledge in that field than I do, living it is totally different, right? And September was a really tough month for me in the sense that my anxiety was through the roof. I was really, as much as I'm sure I put off a positive face to those around me, and I've talked about it openly with a lot of people in my close groups, this won't come as a surprise to them. And I had a great group around me to speak with, and counsel me almost, right? Through all that. But the fear of driving down the highway and having to look at every single car around you at all moments because you think that someone might be coming to take your head off at that point is an unbelievably difficult thing to process.
It just
right?
sounds exhausting.
It sounds exhausting. Like you're stressed every single minute of the day. You're scared. Even being at my house, I didn't know, like, maybe these guys know where I live. Maybe they have a reason to come after me. I don't know, right? And I think I hope not. I think it would have happened by now if they did. But eventually, I want to say probably around the end of October, I'd been through it enough. Well, actually, okay, there's actually a crazy story to this that I'm glad. I'm glad
this is a crazy story?
Yeah,
oh, good. I'm glad we finally got into that part.
In September, in September, about 2 weeks in, I noticed I was having this uptick in massive anxiety, PTSD, all this stuff. So I started doing these crazy things. There's Annie there. Hello.
We'll take a break.
We'll take a little break. How are you doing? How is everything?
No, keep recording. Keep rolling.
How is everything?
Come on over, Annie.
This is actually the first time we've seen each other. How are you doing?
Really?
Yeah.
This is Annie, who was a woman who was here the night that helped put bandages and towels on Brandon. She was the woman that he helped usher in front. So this is the first time they've seen each other.
Yeah, no, she actually is going into nursing school now after everything. So
really?
After saving me from bleeding out, she's now found her calling, which is awesome.
Hear her? Was that a decision out of this experience?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, to be honest, it's because he almost died.
Yes.
In front of me, and I didn't know what exactly to do to save him. And
you're pretty good though. You put some pressure on there. You also got me to call my mom, which she's very happy about.
I didn't know what was gonna happen, and I didn't want him. I didn't know him. I didn't know. I'm like, if something happens, his poor mother. I'm a mother. I'm like, I would want to know. So, yeah.
Yeah. It's good. My 3 guardian angels.
No, well, you saved my life. So.
You saved my life. It's a trade-off. Yeah, that was great.
Well, it keeps on getting more interesting that she's now going into nursing.
Yeah.
That's an impact you have that you may not have known, had you not stayed connected. So, I think one of the beauties of being able to tell your story is there's going to be lots of impact for you that you'll never know or hear about. Yeah. So go back to September 2020.
Yeah. I forget where we were, but basically September 2020 was tough for me. That's when I think the most big, can I speak right now? I'm too excited about everything. That was awesome. I got to see Annie. But yeah, the biggest obstacle I think for trauma survivors in their recovery process is reintegrating back into the real world, right? Whatever that experience you go through is, because you're going around and you're carrying this heavy burden that you otherwise might not have been, right? You're always thinking in the back of your mind, in September 2020, and every 10th thought was something to do with getting shot, right? It's so prevalent there. So when you're out, like I said, when I was at the gym one day, I literally had to leave 10 minutes into my workout because I thought I was gonna have a panic attack. Everything was so, things started getting a little foggy. I'm looking out at every single person in the gym, identifying does this guy look like he might be a threat? Does this guy look like he might be a threat? Is there someone here to finish me off? And obviously, in the back of my mind, I'm like, okay, chill out, man. You're good. Obviously you're fine, but there's something that's just so overwhelming about it that it becomes really difficult to process everything, right? So it took me a little while to get past that. I think we started doing this thing called exposure therapy that I read about in one of my books. And again, when I've talked about me being a psychopath, this is probably a big part of it. I got my roommates to start popping balloons around me when I wasn't looking. In September, I started going for jogs through sketchy areas of the city. And this is like, I could barely run at this point, but I'm like, I can kind of run. I started going for these little like 4 or 5K, probably 3 to 5K jogs.
Can we just stop time out? Can we just redefine what little run means? Okay, a little 5K run, just a quick 3K jaunt.
Yeah.
You know, all right.
Well, at that point, it was kind of like a jog walk. Like it was just getting out, but I started putting myself in these areas of the city that I was super uncomfortable with. Late hours of the night. Like I'm talking 11:30, 12 a.m. going out in the dark because I started to notice how scared I was becoming of like regular things that shouldn't scare me, right? So what did I do? I went the exact opposite route. I put myself in situations that should have scared me or intimidated a normal person. So that way I could, well, I mean, the balloons was a thing tailored to me, but I put myself in these situations I was uncomfortable with so that when I was reintegrating back into regular life situations, I was like, this is nothing. You know, you've been through a hell of a lot worse and you've been okay through it. So it all became about perspective, right? So that was a big challenge for me, and it took me a while to overcome some of those obstacles for sure. But you know, there was some other things we did too, but all of those things just kind of put things in perspective for me, where I realized you're being a little bit irrational here. Like obviously, this one really traumatic circumstance has you thinking this way, and I was able to take a step back and think about it. You know, and analyze the situation and analyze how kind of unreasonable I was being and process things a little bit differently, right? So that sounds a little bit crazy, I'm sure, but again, that could tie into business too, where you have this one bad experience, you have this one deal that goes really south, and you just look at it and you could be nervous on the phone that next time you're calling your client, you could be worried, you could be stressed about it, or you can take what you've been through, understand that it's an anomaly, and get back to the chalkboard and start learning about what you're doing and start becoming comfortable again and growing from it, right?
Did you ever get to a point where like you kind of accepted that setbacks will be a part? You know, we actually talked about your expectations for this nonprofit out of the gate.
Yeah, you know, I did and I didn't. So I think it's important to understand, like I knew there was gonna be some setbacks, but I knew that I could only do what was in my control to overcome them, right? So for example, with starting running again or walking again, I knew that I wasn't going to be able to run in the start of August, right? I knew that that wasn't an attainable goal. So to me, I saw that as a bit of a setback because I would have loved to be running mid-July, right? But understanding realistic timeframes and then doing everything in my power to shatter them, right? And that's like with the not-for-profit right now, obviously I came out of the gate thinking like, we've got a ton of media attraction with this story. We've done really good. Let's blow this thing up quick. And we were able to get a pretty good baseline out of everything, but it's going to take a lot of time to grow, right? I'm going to need to make some connections in the community I didn't have beforehand. I'm going to need to meet some new people. I'm going to need to go out there and do a lot of work. And it's not something that just comes to fruition over a 2 or 3 month period, right? As you might have initially thought, no matter how much energy and ambition that you have to set realistic expectations. And I think that's something that I was able to learn throughout my entire recovery process. Sometimes you're able to shatter those expectations, and that's great. And you need to do everything you can, I think, to shatter those expectations. But you also need to understand the realistic situations that you're being thrown at as well.
You know, I want to bring our conversation to not a permanent close, but to finish off this episode. And when we first began talking, and when Naomi and Jamie and I would be talking about preparing for this story, and you know, we would talk about like, oh, we should have Kelly Clarkson's Stronger, you know, the song is the theme song, and then we talked about, oh, no pain, no gain, but really that doesn't seem like, those don't seem suitable because it doesn't really talk about like actually what you are trying to accomplish, which is like making something happen to you much greater than yourself, multiplying your experience to bring greater good. You know, I think of you know, we just had a birthday in our house, and I lit one candle, and then that candle lit the other candles, and the first candle, of course, didn't lose any of its flame. What would you have to say, like, What do you think the big learning out of all this is for you, and that somebody else could take and apply to themselves?
Yeah, it's always difficult, and I do think about this a lot, because I think at the start with my story, again, I focused on everything that was in my control, and I didn't really see the benefit that it was having to so many others, right? And as we started moving forward with a lot of things, and I started kind of coming out about how this impacted me and being a little bit more open with the general public about my story, I had an unbelievable amount of people who've reached out to me who don't necessarily feel comfortable talking about their unique traumas with the world, talk with me about them, right? And I think they were able to find some solace in understanding that someone else was going through what they were going through, in some form or another, right? Obviously, there's not a lot of people, although I did have a few people who've been shot before reach out to me too. Like it's an anomaly, but they're out there.
Small club, right?
It's a small club for sure. But I think being open in your communications and just in every facet of your life, right? Like I think a lot of the time people often are closed off, and it makes others not think that they're going through the same things that they are, right? You might see this guy or girl on Instagram who's got a bunch of followers, who's looking super happy every day, flaunting their life. They might be miserable on the inside, right? But they're putting on this facade and this face that is unrealistic and unattainable for most people, right? There's going to be a lot of struggles in everybody's lives. There's going to be a lot of great moments in everybody's lives, right? And I think something that was really cool for me, and something that I take a lot of pride in, that I didn't necessarily realize was happening at the start, was a lot of people have seen my story of resilience and what I've been able to overcome, and you know, how I've been able to take what I've been through and take a positive spin on it. And they've used that I know I've had guys who've reached out to me who otherwise wouldn't have been running, for example, who are like, man, you've driven me, I want to run this marathon in the fall. You've driven me to get back into the gym and lose those 20 pounds I put on during COVID. You've driven me to start journaling. You've driven me to get my reading up. Like, you've changed my life because you've made me want to change my perspective on how I think about things. And these are all things that, like, again, when I say I'm fortunate to have been through what I've been through, I am, I think, because this has allowed me this opportunity to connect with people I otherwise wouldn't have had, and it's allowed me to be open with everybody about my experiences and have a really positive impact on other people's lives, because they feel like they're not alone in their struggles, right? And to me, there is no better feeling in the world that I could ever have than making a positive influence on those around me. And that's something I learned about myself throughout this, right? I think I've always been that way with my friends and my family, where I want to see them succeed, and I'll, you know, literally take a bullet for these people, right? Like, I would do anything I could to see them flourish. And if I can use my story to do that, like, everything will have been worth it for me, and I think that's the case right now. So if there's one thing that I think I take out of this that brings me the most peace, it is just knowing that I've created this positive environment for so many people, and an environment of comfort. Like I said, I've had a lot of people reach out to me with their unique traumas and talked about them to me for the first time with most people, right? I've met some really cool people who were in a dark place, who were able to find a little bit of peace in what I was going through. I was able to provide them some resources, right, that helped me. Like, I was able to create this network I otherwise never would have been a part of, and make some positive difference in, you know, this group's lives, and also the lives of, I think, the more general public, right? So I'm really happy that I've had that opportunity, and I think, again, like I said, I would do it all again, knowing the response that I had now, to create that change for everybody. I think it's great. I think it's something that really helped me get through the darkest days for me. You know, you just saw me talking with Annie there. The first couple months, the thing that got me through the most was knowing that it was me and not her, and her 3 daughters were gonna grow up with their mom, right? Like, we showed where the bullet went in. There's a good chance that hits her in the head. Like, she's, you know, 3 bullets were pretty different height ratios. Anything could have happened, right? She was able to go home to her 3 kids that night, alive, well. I was able to bounce back. It was, you know, it was a very fortunate circumstance, all things considered. And we didn't know each other before, but like I said, I'm unbelievably grateful that it was me and not her, because I'm able to do the things that I'm doing right now, and she's able to get home to her 3 kids and, you know, be there for them when they need it. So yeah.
Something that I hear a lot as I've, you know, met some people that work alongside you or that have been impacted by this, that you may not hear in the same way because it's you and I get to be an observer.
Yeah.
And it's that they've felt invited into the journey with you. And I think that is, when I tell this story, when I tell your story to people, that is the lesson I'm sharing with them, is that the key to the success you've had in your recovery, the key to the success you've had in launching this nonprofit and becoming a charity, the key to the success in your first virtual run event has been your invitation into others to co-create and co-own your story. You could very easily have taken it and held it tightly to yourself, but it's really been an invitation for others to come along. Brandon, as before, I want to leave you with the last word, though. Is there anything else you'd like to share?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing really that comes to mind. I'm thankful for you making the trip down to Ottawa to speak with me. I think it was really good to get a lot of this stuff out there, and I hope it gets in the right eyes. I think there's a lot of cool things that we can do from this. Yeah, I think, like I said, I'm really happy I had the opportunity to do so. I really hope that I can take this and really make a positive difference in the lives of many, right? Like you said, my story can be applied in so many different ways. It can be applied in a business setting. It can be applied with survivors of anything. It could be literally, I could talk to kids about this stuff and overcoming obstacles and resiliency. There is really no limit to where I'm able to impact other people's lives with this. And I think that's an unbelievably cool solace for me. And I hope I'm able to touch as many people in a positive manner as I can throughout my ongoing recovery process, I guess. My life is going to be an ongoing recovery process from here on out, given some of the long-term damage that I have. But I'm really hoping that I can make the most of it and continue to share my journey with everybody and make some real positive change moving forward.
And if people want to connect with you, how do they do it? What's the website?
Yeah, so our website for our not-for-profit, hopefully soon to be charity, is www.htgrcanada.com. Our Instagram and TikTok tags are at htgrcanada. And then, my personal Instagram is at Peacock_Brandon. Seriously, if you have any, you want to talk to me, you have any crazy stories, you just want a shoulder to kind of lean on, I'm always happy to speak to anybody. I've been fortunate to speak to so many great people over this entire recovery process that I'm always happy to do so, and knowing that I can make any sort of positive impact on somebody's life is literally the best thing that I can be, able to do at this point in my life. So seriously, reach out at any time, and I appreciate you taking the time here, Matt.
Brandon, thank you so much. As you know, this did not happen just by my idea. Behind the camera is Adam. He's a partner of ours here in Ottawa. I'm going to put a link to his company and his partner in the show notes. To his right is Austin Pomeroy, who if you've listened to our podcast before, you know I do not sound as good as I do in real life. It's thanks to him doing the editing. Naomi Grossman helped prepare for this with research. Cindy Craig helped get the calendar and the booking to happen. You can imagine Brandon's schedule, my schedule to come to Ottawa was not easy. If you've seen this on social or the website or YouTube or somewhere else, Jamie Hunter, our content manager, is responsible for that. Carrie Cotton is taking care of clients while I'm out here in Ottawa having like an amazing chat and doing all this learning. I know there's others I need to thank. My wife, Allison, I'm away for the whole day today, and she had no problem saying, yes, go, do, share these stories. If you just jumped into this and you missed episode 1, you can catch it wherever you get fine podcasts, the Leading with Nice interview series. You can also find it on our website, leadingwithnice.com. But normally I'd encourage you to reach out to us and how can we work together. If you want to do that, I'd love to share with you some of the learning and how we can apply it in your business. But before you do that, you need to visit HTGI Canada.
HTGR.
HTGR.
Hit the ground running.
HTGR. Canada.com. I always just Google hit the ground running Canada and it comes up first to Google for me. You need to visit, get a hold of Brandon first before you talk to us, because you can definitely find a way to partner with Brandon and to maybe take some of this and apply what he can offer with you and your organization. We'll see you next time on the podcast. Thanks very much for listening today.